Okay, all right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first Tribal Collaboration Outcome Area Working Group meeting. A few housekeeping items before we begin. This meeting is being recorded, and the California Department of Technology will be posting a video with this meeting, our slides, and transcript to the Broadband for All portal under past events. Next slide, please. And quickly too, my name is Ann Nguyen. I'm the Engagement and Operations Manager with the Office of Broadband and Digital Literacy. As you can probably see on the screen already, our ASL interpreters are being spotlighted so that you can see them throughout the meeting. Under View Side-by-Side Speaker View, you'll see the ASL interpreters, myself, and whoever will spotlight throughout the meeting. Once we have our bidirectional conversation, you can switch to side-by-side gallery view, which will help you see everyone else in the meeting as well. We have closed captioning, and you can turn that on towards the bottom of the toolbar. The chat is on and available. We invite you to introduce yourself if you haven't already, your name, pronouns, organization title, where you're joining us from. If you can also use the chat to ask our speakers any questions, our staff will highlight that, and we might read it out loud during this conversation or ask you to come off mute and tell us your question as well. So lastly, please use your raise hand feature. What that does is bring your screen up so that we can see you and make sure to unmute you so that you participate. We're trying to reduce background noise so that's easier and respectful for everyone participating. And with that, I would like to introduce Scott Adams, Deputy Director of the California Department of Technology of Broadband and Digital Literacy, to begin our discussion on the state digital equity plan process. And before I hand the mic to Scott as well, I want to make sure that we're aware of the other agenda items today, which is having our guest speakers give context to what is digital equity and why it is important. We'll engage in a bidirectional, multi-directional community and lived experience verbally and on chat. Our next step is calls to action and our closing. So with that, Scott.
Well, thank you so much, Ann, and welcome everyone to the first of our digital equity planning process working groups on tribal collaboration. Just honored to be with you and looking forward to a fruitful and meaningful both conversation and utilizing this space to grow our collaboration. As Ann said, I am Scott Adams. I'm the Deputy Director of Broadband and Digital Literacy at the California Department of Technology. And our office is really works to coordinate the Broadband for All program and related initiatives and to help close the digital divide and create digital or foster digital equity throughout the state. Next slide, please. Just real quick, wanted to point out as we have this conversation in the context of Broadband for All, to note that Broadband for All is the state's overarching program to close the digital divide and foster digital equity. And it's really based on three main things, and that's access, so access to infrastructure and service, affordability, ensuring that service is affordable, and then adoption of the service and helping overcome those barriers to for all residents in California, including those on tribal lands, can get to digital literacy and inclusion and digital equity. Next slide, please. Real quick, we just wanted to kind of point out that where the digital equity planning process is in the landscape and the evolution of the state's efforts on broadband. And those really began in 2010 with the creation of the California Broadband Council, which is a multi-body entity that has coordinated the deployment and adoption of broadband throughout the state. in un- and underserved communities is determined by the Public Utilities Commission. There are 9 state agency members of the Broadband Council, including the Department of Technology and the Public Utilities Commission, the Transportation Agency, Department of General Services, et cetera. The California Emerging Technology Fund is a non-state entity member of that body, and there are representatives from the state assembly and the state senate. Where the focus of the state really changed was during the height of the COVID pandemic, as we all learned and experienced it, shone an even brighter light on the state's persistent digital divide and necessitated bold action. So in 2020, the governor, Gavin Newsom, issued his broadband executive order, which amongst other things directed the Broadband Council to develop a statewide broadband action plan. And that step was also done in 2020, and just 4 months at the height of the pandemic, with input and collaboration from over 700 entities. And the Broadband Action Plan really laid out a roadmap of how the state would approach, in partnership with many entities at many levels, to close the digital divide. We really want to point out that a source of pride here in California is in 2021, when with the passage of the historic Senate Bill 156. So really thankful to the legislature and the governor for really creating a structure and a framework and allocating billions of dollars to address the need for funding for additional infrastructure on the middle mile side, and additional funding to support deployment of last mile network solutions. And $6 billion in total, which has been augmented since then, but $3.25 billion was allocated to the Department of Technology to develop a statewide open access middle mile network. We had retained Golden State Net to be the third-party administrator on that project, and Caltrans is really a critical partner in that effort, and leading the construction of the open access middle mile network along the state highway system. Also want to draw attention that Senate Bill 156 allocated an additional upwards of $2 billion to the Public Utilities Commission to add to their existing programs and develop last mile grant programs to support local ISPs and other entrants, and other eligible entities like cities, counties, schools, and libraries, to leverage funding to develop last mile network solutions in un- and unserved communities. And then the last piece is the state is aggressively working to leverage additional broadband funding in the Investment in Infrastructure and Jobs Act programs, which the federal government set aside an additional $65 billion for states and local entities to both deploy broadband infrastructure and broadband adoption efforts. And you'll see on the left there, the focus of this engagement session is really the legislature in the last session designated the Department of Technology to go after additional federal dollars that are included in the Digital Equity Act programs to develop a state digital equity plan and leverage funds to implement that plan. Next slide, please. So real quick, I know a lot of folks here are familiar with the previous components that we talked about. So there's the middle mile, there's the PUC's last mile programs, and then where there's a significant amount of funding. What we are at the beginning of a process of working with you all to develop the state's digital equity plan, which will really afford all of us an opportunity to co-create how we leverage capacity grant dollars that will come to the state once that plan is developed. So in order to maximize the ability for critical, partners and stakeholders, to come to the table. We've developed really a 5-point process, and that's a statewide digital equity planning group that consists of the Broadband Council member entities and 12 other state agencies with a connection to covered populations and subject matter expertise. These outcome area working groups that will be conducted virtually over the next several months to bring together a broad group of partners and subject matter experts. We'll be releasing a number of digital equity surveys to help acquire data to inform decisions from both residents and organizations. And then because we're committed to actually getting out into the communities and engaging with a broad variety of partners in development of the plan, we are going to be working with the Public Utilities Commission to host 20 regional and local events across the state in every economic and broadband consortia region, so that we can meet with you all where you live and where you work, and seek your feedback and input. We'll also have additional opportunities for statewide public engagement, communicating through the Broadband for All portal, our monthly email updates, and other meetings, consultations, and opportunities to engage. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we've developed 6 outcome area working groups. These are non-exclusive entities and really opportunities to expand the table from the existing folks who've been working in the digital equity space and bringing in new partners to both on the planning and implementation side. And we've set them up to correspond to the state's other priorities. So education, health, digital literacy and inclusion, essential services, accessibility and civic engagement, workforce and economic development, and tribal collaboration. And really want to underscore that these are all-inclusive working groups and encourage participation from many different folks across the state. Next slide. One thing we wanted to point out about the Digital Equity Act, which is really outlines the work that states must do in developing their digital equity plans, prioritizes investments for 8 covered populations, and want to make sure that we call out that the covered populations, that the lens through which we'll be looking at all of our work over the coming months are, looking at the needs and barriers for individuals living in covered households at or below 150% of the federal poverty level, aging individuals, incarcerated individuals, veterans, individuals with disabilities, individuals with language barriers, members of racial or ethnic minority groups, and those living primarily in rural areas. Next slide, please. So the focus of the working groups is really, as I had mentioned earlier, to bring together subject matter experts and practitioners and folks in the community to align and develop strategies that align with the digital equity plan priorities through the lens of the covered populations. The primary objectives of the working groups is to develop a stakeholder map for the outcome area, to help conduct an asset inventory of programs and plans and services for each outcome area, to help promote and encourage participation in the statewide digital equity survey. And then in future meetings, when we've pulled together those data points, participate in kind of a group gap analysis and ultimately develop recommendations to the Department of Technology for both inclusion in the digital equity plan and direction on how to really have a say in how we might spend the state's digital equity capacity dollars. And Anne, I think I'm done, so I'm going to hand it back to you and just thank you very much really appreciate, folks who are in attendance here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you for giving us that context, Scott, and thank you for everyone for being here. I know you have plenty of other events and obligations on a Friday, so we're very grateful that you're joining us this morning. And with that, I would like to pivot to the next portion where we have our guest speakers to help us define and give even more context on what is digital equity and why it is important. So our list of speakers include Gladys, our FPO from NTIA, Abby, our Digital Navigator Manager from NDIA, Davida, our Digital Inclusion Manager from Ameren Critical Infrastructure, and lastly, Matt Rantanen, Senior Advisor of Tribal Broadband from Golden State Network and Scenic. So Gladys, if you don't mind starting us off with this conversation.
Thanks so much, Anne. It's so great to see this gathering. Got some great partners on the call, and it's great to see everybody. Good morning, everybody. My name is Gladys Papalatuk, as Anne mentioned, and I am one of 2 federal program officers or state lead for California from NTIA, again, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. Thank you to the CDT team for inviting us to participate this week. It's been wonderful to hear all the discussions throughout the week and on all the different working group areas. And also thank you for all the good work CDT has been doing. The team has been outstanding, and it's been great to see the evolution and the progress that they've made. It has been a very busy few months. It's also great to see, again, so many longtime partners on the call, and my co-speakers here are longtime partners. So good to see that, and look forward to working with everyone else on the call that we're getting to know, or we will be getting to know. My focus today is to share the definition of DE from an NTIA perspective. It will look very similar to what NDIA will be saying as well, I'm sure. And I will also be talking about the objectives of the planning process for Digital Equity Act and how it will factor into the next phase of the program into the state capacity grants. So let me get started. For the Digital Equity Act programs, digital equity is defined as the condition in which individuals and communities have information technology capacity that is needed for full participation in society and the economy. Digital inclusion enables or leads to digital equity. This means the activities that are necessary to ensure that all individuals have access to and use of affordable information and communication technologies such as reliable fixed and wireless broadband internet service, internet-enabled devices that meet the needs of the user, and applications and online content designed to enable and encourage self-sufficiency, participation, and collaboration. It must also include obtaining access to digital literacy training, the provision of quality technical support, and obtaining basic awareness and measures to ensure online privacy and cybersecurity, not social security. Digital equity is the goal, and digital inclusion is how we get there. As Scott mentioned, CDT was awarded a $4 million state planning grant for 1 year, beginning in December 2022 through November 2023. The planning process objective is to develop a state digital equity plan. The planning process requires engagement of major key stakeholders like yourselves and the public throughout the state to solicit input and feedback from communities and sectors like yours to develop the state digital equity plan. As part of bill or the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Digital Equity Act and the BEAD program goal is connecting 100% of all Americans. So local and regional participation is a must, and all voices need to be heard in order for the programs to be successful. The state will need the help of each working group to reach and engage your networks throughout the state deeply and meaningfully. The planning process will factor into the next phase, the state capacity grant. Only entities who complete the planning grant program can apply, and a state digital equity plan is required to be eligible. The state capacity grant will be used to implement the state digital equity plans and promote digital inclusion. NTIA anticipates a NOFO, or a notice of funding opportunity, as Scott mentioned earlier, for the state capacity grant by the end of this year. By mid-2024, we anticipate the 5-year state capacity implementation will have already begun. That concludes my quick presentation for today, but please reach out to us for more information. And if you'd like more briefing for your organizations or tribes, we'd be happy to do that as well. We've begun doing that with the Tribal Chairmen's Association throughout the state. And so we're going to be reaching out with our tribal FPOs who are also on the webinar today to individual tribes very soon in this next few months. So thank you again, and we look forward to working with each of you. And I'll hand it back to you, Anne.
Thank you so much, Gladys. And next slide, please. We have Abby and Davida. Please take it over.
You can go on to our pictures slide where you can get a duplicate image of what we look like. So Davida and I are here. I'm very glad to follow in TIA with representation from NDIA because our names do get confused sometimes. So I work for the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. We are an organization that works with digital inclusion practitioners all over the community, and we support their community programs, and we also learn from them in order to equip policymakers to act. And so that is our role, and we're very excited to share some similar definitions, a pop quiz to see if you are paying attention to definitions of digital inclusion and digital equity. And we know we have several slides, and we're going to go through them relatively quickly, but we want you to have them to access later. So don't worry, those are coming your way. Davida, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Davida, a citizen of the Navajo Nation based in Phoenix, Arizona. So as a close partner of NDIA, we at Ameren Critical Infrastructure help to support NDIA as they implement programs in tribal communities. And we also just provide general support and guidance.
Thanks. Next slide. So starting with a review of these definitions, and I would say that we had the definition first, and it was written by our community. Community digital inclusion practitioners work together to define what digital equity would be, and that is the condition in which all individuals and communities have everything they need to participate in our society, democracy, and economy. And it's really the goal that we're working towards. Next slide. So if digital equity is the goal, then the digital divide is the reason that we don't have digital equity right now. It's the gap between those who have everything they need to participate in our society online and those that don't. We know that the digital divide disproportionately affects people of color, people on tribal lands, households with low incomes, people with disabilities, people in rural areas, and older adults. Next slide. And digital inclusion, it's the work that we do towards achieving digital equity. Next slide. I told you there are a lot of them. So here is a list of the 5 elements that our community has recognized as being necessary for digital inclusion. So just quickly, those are broadband, which is affordable and robust and meets everyone's needs, internet-enabled devices that meet the needs of the user, digital skills training, quality technical support, and applications and online content that are accessible. Next slide. In order for communities to make substantial and sustainable progress towards digital equity, they must have a strong digital inclusion ecosystem. And that includes programs and policies that meet all the needs in their community, particularly related to those items on the previous slide. A common way to build a strong digital inclusion ecosystem is to build a digital inclusion coalition. Those are place-based collectives of organizations that are working together to raise awareness and funds for their digital inclusion work, and they collaborate to make sure that their efforts complement each other and don't leave gaps. There's a number of great existing digital inclusion coalitions in California, and we are excited to see efforts like this today where people are working together to make sure that everything is there that these communities need. Next slide. So even if a community has established the resources that it needs to meet the needs of their community and their individuals in their community, Individuals often need support as they understand and access those resources. One model for providing support is the digital navigator model. Digital navigators are trusted guides who address the whole digital inclusion process for community members through repeated interactions. They're sometimes the front desk of that coalition, and they provide that human element, a friendly face to those who are moving towards digital equity. Next slide.
So in tribal communities, we are seeing digital inclusion efforts becoming more prominent, and this is evident in Arizona in the Gila River Indian community with Digital Connect. Digital Connect currently has a digital navigator on staff who is helping community members with setting up their devices. Their staff are working on building local and state relationships and networking with other tribes to build job skills and education. Next slide. When we talk about engaging with tribal communities, we often emphasize to folks at the state and non-tribal folks that Native nations are sovereign nations and are therefore rights holders rather than stakeholders. They have a right to be included in conversations and planning and policy implementation at all levels because they have the sovereign right to manage their resources and services. Tribal nations working towards digital equity can toe the line between the technical aspect of broadband deployment and providing digital inclusion resources to the community. This concept of the digital equity ecosystem relates to how the entire tribal community is working together to solve the digital divide. And tribal leaders should be informed about digital inclusion to understand these needs of the community holistically. Next slide. So we know that you are connected with this group, specifically with California efforts. If you're also interested in networking and learning from folks across the nation, you can join the NDIA community. NDIA is a community of digital inclusion practitioners, researchers, academics who have a very active listserv and monthly calls. The Indigenous Digital Inclusion Working Group is fairly new and is working with a network of tribes, practitioners, and partners sharing the unique challenges in our communities in Indian country with some international Indigenous representation. We know there's some great efforts happening in California, and we hope to learn more and even connect with you all if possible as well. So, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Our next speaker, Matt, can we make sure to spotlight and unmute?
Thank you. So Matt Rantanen, Senior Advisor for Tribal Broadband for Golden State Network, which is the third-party administrator to the California Department of Technology in that middle mile effort. However, I had 21 and a half years of experience as the Director of Technology with the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association. And I just wanted to reflect back on some of the things that were said and the importance of this piece of digital equity. I think what people often forget, those of us that build networks, think, well, if we build this infrastructure and we have this internet opportunity, people will just sign up for it and use it. And, we had that understanding as we built out the Tribal Digital Village Network in Southern California. And what we didn't realize was that there was this digital equity piece, this understanding and education piece that was a part of that. And, we never got more than 50% of the tribal homes to sign on to the TDV network, for a variety of reasons. But one of the biggest reasons was that piece of equity and ownership and understanding of the internet. So I definitely want to make sure that folks are engaged at this level, because as you build out your communications networks, as you work with public utilities to build out your last mile, part of the build out of that last mile is building out the education and information and interaction with your community to make sure that that community understands the value of what you're bringing and what that opportunity might look like to an individual rather than a community at large or a tribal government. Because we did some work in the RS Stimulus Funding Act through a BTOP grant in Southern California, and realized, that we got a grant that was essentially a digital equity piece, but it was more of a marketing, if you will, for broadband piece, and we didn't have an understanding of what the user level was in experience, and whether or not they understood what broadband was versus what access to the internet was. And then also whether or not they knew how to integrate that into their daily life without it being disruptive. How to manage their digital footprint, what they left behind when they're using the internet, like what they left behind for others to see. So it was a real eye opener for us as we look through, our learning process and building out a network for folks and understanding, the grander scope of things, that you're also building community awareness, you're building education, you are building interaction. And in the last year and a half, 2 years, I've been a part of a thing called the Tribal Broadband Boot Camps. And it's most interesting because Davida and Abby are on this call, and they do attend the Tribal Broadband Boot Camps. And we have so many people that build networks that are like, I don't want to do the digital inclusion part. Can we just like stand outside and we'll just wait till that part's over? It's so weird that the folks building networks don't want to know the whole complete story. And every time we say, no, it's part of the deal. You got to hang out and learn everything. And once the session is over, we do surveys and we have people, report on what their best sessions were and, what their worst sessions were and things like that. And Abby and Davida and NDIA and the digital inclusion piece, digital equity piece is ranked the highest in all of the things we do, even though you can get hands-on splicing fiber, hands-on building a wireless network, and all kinds of things like that. People rank that digital equity piece as the piece that they learn the most from and the most valuable piece that's taught, because it's something that we all forget. It's all a piece. We just assume that people are going to get on board with this. It's not necessarily the case. There are other barriers like cost and, just access to equipment, computers, et cetera, and a learning curve to be able to use those devices. But that's the reality is this completes the picture. So the digital equity piece is really valuable. And in building out the middle mile that I'm a part of, and working with CPUC at the last mile that I'm a part of, and still working with Tribal Chairmen's Association, this has become very apparent in our future. So just want to make sure that folks are very aware of this. We will be having more of these meetings. So those of your neighbors, your tribal neighbors that you engage with that may have not had the time to attend this, please have them either watch the recording of this or attend the next meeting. So thank you.
And thank you for extending the invitation, Matt. If you don't mind staying on spotlight, I wanted to make sure to wrap up this session, thanking Gladys, Abby, Javita, and Matt for joining us and starting this conversation that we're having here today. In the next portion, next slide, please. We would like to open up the floor, the mic, chat, all that is available on Zoom right now for you to share the community and lived experiences of tribal communities and those you work with. Next slide, please. Just a few things to start thinking about. Is please share what you can about what your tribal community is facing in terms of achieving digital equity, right? We're hoping to address this larger prompt with 3 questions. So I'll ask the first one. And again, feel free to use the chat and use your hand raise function so that we can unmute you. What digital equity barriers do your tribal communities or those you serve experience? And how do those barriers affect educational, health, economic, and social outcomes for tribal members and communities? Let that question sink in for a bit, and if any brave soul wants to start us off, go for it.
Yeah, either put your information or your question in the chat, raise your hand. There's a number of ways to get your question out. Feel free to speak up. We know it's tough to sometimes deal with in front of the crowd. I did see in the comments that part of digital equity and part of this tribal engagement is one-on-one with each tribe, and we understand that completely. The focus here is to get general information out and education for folks so that we can have those one-on-one conversations with the tribes and do tribal engagement. And also, some of the stories or the questions that you may have now may be extremely relevant for others that are on the call. So please feel free to chime in.
Alan, would you mind going off mute and share us your thought that you also write in the chat?
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I was distracted there. I didn't catch the ask. I was busy typing.
No worries. We love what you typed and just want to make sure others are able to hear it as well. If you don't mind coming off mute and just telling us your insights and your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I'm with the Kashan Indian Tribe, Fort Yuma Indian Reservation down here in the extreme southeast corner of California. I spent 12 years working on broadband middle mile in Western Arizona, so I have a lot of familiarity with the topic. I've been with the Kashan Tribe for about a year, and I'm suddenly plugged back into the broadband discussions. We're at, I looked at the map on one of the links that were sent over on the middle mile build out plan, 100,000 miles or whatever it was. And I noticed that we're at a key entry point into California, of course, down here, between Arizona and California on Interstate 8. So that's almost like a gateway for middle mile investment or build out. I did share on there that we just recently had a demographic analysis conducted, and digital equity was one of the topics covered in the research. And 85% of our internet users on the reservation are mobile based, which is easy to understand, and it's mostly younger users, 19 to 30 years old. But only 12% rely on any type of hard broadband connection to the home. So that to me, that's interesting. They're obviously part of that Gen Z type of thing where mobile is it, but there doesn't, and there could be a lot of factors why that 12% figure is there. But the biggest one is our persistent poverty. We're very high up there in the Census Bureau and everything else statistics, and you also have multi-generational households, and a lot of households are led by single moms with kids. So I think that budget is probably one of the biggest factors on why there's not more connection to broadband. So I know I'm aware of the programs available to help reduce that cost and subsidies for that, but anecdotally, I don't know that many people on the reservation are taking advantage of that. And that's about all I can contribute right now.
Alan, thank you very much for your comments. It's good to meet you. I did put in the chat my email address, so please copy that down. I would love to have that conversation with you and bring in the folks about Network.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that. Yeah, our tribe is very in tune with the broadband conversation. We welcome this opportunity to discuss it with you. We have some ideas.
I wanted to address number one as well. I do believe we have maybe some Caltrans folks on the call. I'm not positive. I'm looking through the list at the moment, but I would include in that meeting with you your regional Caltrans folks as well, to have that discussion about Taro and other tribal cultural monitoring, because they are actively pursuing conversations directly with each tribe.
Okay.
As it affects.
Yeah, we have ongoing discussions with District 11 down here in San Diego. So on other infrastructure issues, but the more hands involved in this, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
All right, great. Shoot me an email. We'll get that going.
I sure will. Thank you.
All right.
And can I add to that, just encouraging not only Alan, but Alan and other tribes, there are also, in addition to the state efforts, there are also about a little over, I think, 12 or 13 regional broadband consortia in the state. Now I'll put their contact information link in the chat, but just to loop them in on your efforts and making sure that they are aware of your gaps, whether it's infrastructure or digital equity. They can also be a resource in many ways, particularly for ACP signups. That's
Sure.
something that they've been doing to help communities increase those numbers. So
I'm aware that Imperial County has a consortium, and those ACP hookups, I'm a fan, and I don't know if the message is being heard Maybe the volume needs to be turned up.
Yeah, they can help with outreach and sign up. So we'll put
Gladys,
that in
is
the
that
chat.
the Southern Border
Yeah.
Broadband Consortium?
It's
Is that-
Tim,
yes.
it's IVEDC, Tim Kelly's group, Alan, if
Oh,
you're
Tim Kelly.
familiar.
Right, yeah,
with
I
it.
know Tim.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Like
do.
you usually put a bug in his ear.
Okay, thanks.
Davida, I think I see
Yeah.
your.
I was gonna say, in terms of ACP outreach and signups, actually, the Hoopa Valley Tribe has a new digital navigator on staff, and they've been learning so much in terms of the experience of not only living in California, but also the tribal perspective of signing up folks through ACP. And their digital navigator, Abe, is going to be talking at our Indigenous Digital Inclusion Working Group. So if anybody's interested in hearing that perspective, that's going to be, I believe, on March 8th. But you can email me too if you're interested in joining that conversation too. Thanks.
Go ahead, Scott.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to say thank you, Ellen, so much for sharing those, I think unique and common challenges, and appreciate the comments that others have made in response, and that there are many different investments and components that the state is leveraging to support broadband for all. And is Matt mentioned that these working groups are established to really expand the table of folks committed to working with tribal nations to in partnership to address the connectivity and digital equity needs. And the more that we can utilize this space in this informal setting to identify those partners, that's really one of the outputs that we're looking to identify through the digital equity planning process. And then I did just want to note, someone made a comment earlier in the chat that there are multiple touch points over the next many months that will be connecting with partners, and particularly the tribal nation partners. Both the Department of Technology and the Public Utilities Commission will be doing formal both group and individual consultations. So I want to make sure that folks know that we're available. I neglected to mention that I'm the Department of Technology's tribal advisor, and really our staff is available at any time for formal consultations and informal meetings. And just, this administration and the state are committed to working with our tribal partners on all things broadband. So wanted to underscore that, and thank you for giving voice to those concerns.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
Oh, I want to pass the mic over to our graduate student assistant, just so we can, include the next question. That if you have something to share about the first one, please feel free to do so and don't hold back. I would like to introduce Zach. Please come off mic and introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you. And hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you all today, and thank you for joining us. My name is Zach. I am in my final semester as a master's in public policy student at UC Berkeley, and very excited to be helping out with this work and with this planning process. I was previously working with the Yurok tribe on environmental law regulation, and so pleased to be continuing to work now on the state side, trying to boost tribal collaboration and increase equity for everyone. Our next prompt for our lived experience discussion today, and again, you can drop responses in the chat or please come off mute and share if you're able to, are some examples. We'd love to hear some examples of effective approaches that you or someone you know of or some community you know of may have worked on that address digital equity barriers for tribal communities and on tribal lands.
I think while we're waiting for others to queue up, just interrupt me as they do, Zach. During that BTOP funding opportunity and grant opportunity, quite a few years back now, we held community sessions where people could come and learn a variety of topics like how to do online banking, how to do video communications with someone over the internet, and a few of the, you know, the base level things that we feel so accustomed to doing today. But with communities that don't have access to internet, those are, you know, strange processes. You know, if you're a student and you're at school, you understand most of this. If you're a grandparent or a parent who has been at home, you know, or working somehow through COVID and then not having internet access at their home, you know, some of these processes are not necessarily normal. So, you know, they're dispelling the myths effectively were one of the effective methods, you know, and how to just manage yourself on the internet so that you weren't setting yourself up for failure. Was one of the best ways I think that we got through to individuals. So that's one example.
Thank you, Matt. Linda, I see you've raised your hand.
Hi, my name is Linda Thomas, and I'm a vice president at Cal.net, and we were awarded $2.7 million in NTIA funds to bring fiber to the home to the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians. And there's 59 homes on the premises and several community buildings. So one thing that made our grant awardable, I would say, is our very close working relationship with the tribal leaders and what they needed and what they wanted, and allowing them to take the lead on a lot of what was said in the grant. And then as we're building out this fiber, also talking to them about things like digital literacy and ACP, because we are an ACP provider, and a Microsoft Airband partner. And so we are looking at other Airband partners such as Rural LISC, who provide digital navigators and digital literacy and digital fluency training to bring in and to help with this as the fiber gets installed in the homes.
Absolutely, that's it. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I see Bob Gemmell on the call. I'm wondering if there's any perspective from the Indian Health Service side on tribal engagement on digital equity and from the health and telemedicine side of things. Not to put you on the spot, and he may be tied up, but
I think, Matt, that's a really good point, because there are other state entities and other, I think, partners that are equally committed to working with tribal nations on digital equity issues, or acknowledge that digital equity and connectivity issues really empower other outcomes on their area of focus. I'm wondering if, you know, some of those folks here would like to share some of the related efforts that they're working on.
while we're waiting for that, I do know that Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association has a current grant application seeking funding that is working in concert with Indian Health Services in San Diego County in North County to basically create a digital learning facility where people would understand how to do a lot of the things we're talking about today and get their hands on equipment and get some training, and then also bring an element of tribal youth through a program that would help elders in telemedicine set up networks, manage health devices like blood pressure cuffs and oxygen monitors and different things like that for home care. And we're working, we hope to be working hand in hand with them if the grant is approved, to be able to make sure that health is woven into the conversation when we're talking about broadband at every aspect, and in the training and moving up through there. I see Bob joined, so go ahead, Bob.
I'm sorry about that. I had a heck of a time getting unmuted there. Should have been more obvious to me, but thank you, Matt, for shouting my name. You were asking about IHS and our engagement or our perspective on digital.
Well, digital equity, but also like in relation to question number 2, what are examples of effective approaches that that have worked on addressing the digital equity barriers for tribal communities, the ones that you engage them on a health perspective, and we're kind of talking about like just a communications perspective, but specifically about health.
Well, thank you for asking. If you don't mind, I'm going to take off my federal hat and put on a different hat, because I used to be the information manager for a tribe in the Northwest, the Suquamish tribe. And we actually, it's a very interesting topic to me, because we approached this quite a while ago. And when I first went there, it was kind of, the internet was still new, and people were trying to figure out, what to make of this. Is this technology that's coming down the pike? Is this necessary? How do we use it? And we started thinking about it, like we started building websites and then getting computers to people. And then we built a learning center so that people could learn how to use those computers. And then using those computers, they could learn how to build websites, etc. We ended up building a communications tower as well. And the point of this is, we started to look at this as like, this needs to be organic. This needs to all be tied together, and look at it differently, and look at this. How does this support tribal sovereignty? Is there such a thing as digital sovereignty? Do we need to control or protect or expand our sovereignty in the ether, in the information space? The thing I wanted to mention to you, Matt, is I'm so happy to see that you're on the call, because when we started doing this and looking at this more organically, we saw this is all part of a whole. And while I was doing some research, I stumbled across your effort, the Digital Village, and we're like, wait, somebody beat us to it. Somebody's already thought about all this stuff. And we ended up and I have to apologize, we ended up calling our project the Suquamish Electronic Nation Project, and we were borrowing directly from you. So thank you for letting us do that. So yeah, for me to bring it to a point, yeah, make sure if you're a tribe that you're not treating these as separate projects. This all ties together. You need to think about it organically. You need to get the community involved. One of the biggest things we did was getting computers. The BIA had some excess computers. We got them and they were in great shape. So we moved our computers out to tribal homes and then set them up with internet. So we're getting elders involved and learning how to use computers. Get with your tribal councils, make sure there's an ordinance in place that mandates that if there's an open ditch on the reservation anywhere, that conduit goes in, so that you are not digging twice to put down fiber optic. Make sure every time, it doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't cost them anything to let you put the pipe in there, and it will pay off. Eventually you can build out your network. And then putting my IHS hat back on to answer your question. We come at this, Indian Health Service, and we are about to roll out a new electronic health record system that's going to replace our PMS, our archaic health record system. And for tribes that want to partake in that, the optimal experience is going to be if you have broadband, because it's going to work on slow networks, but it'll be a different experience. And so we can see that healthcare is going to be supported by broadband in ways that we want to be engaged in getting the message out. In addition to that, if California tribes get together and want to establish, an actual hospital or regional health center in California, then access to those physicians would be best served by having some telemedicine component. And to do that, again, you need broadband. I think I went on a little long, but thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Extremely relevant. As we see, well, specifically COVID, obviously staying at home and then trying to get health services while you're at home was tough if you didn't have broadband. Home visits and things like that potentially spread COVID to people, and that was dangerous. So telemedicine is a big part of our future.
Yeah.
Not just physical telemedicine, but like also mental health as well.
Right.
Thank you, Bob, and thanks, Matt, for identifying Bob amongst our participants. We want to make sure we get to the third question, but again, feel free to come back to one or two as you see fit.
Can I draw attention to
Yeah.
the last entry in the chat?
Mhm. Oh.
Fear of the internet is a barrier. People are embarrassed and they don't know how to use it, so they're also afraid that they will break it. That was one of our biggest experiences on the BTOP grant that we performed, a number of years ago. Was that they were afraid of breaking the computer, they were afraid of breaking the tablet, they were afraid of breaking their phone if they messed around with the software too much. And we did a lot of work to try to show how resilient these systems are and resilient these pieces of equipment are, and that it took some concerted effort to actually break them. It's easy to screw up your configuration a little bit, but it was pretty hard to break something. So one of the things we promote at the boot camps, and I think Abby and Davida could attest to this, is that there are no stupid questions, and it's a safe environment to talk about things because everybody's coming from a different learning level. So, a question on how do I turn on my computer is not an irrelevant question when we're in this arena, because there are people that never have used or had access to computers and may have a brand new device and don't know how it works. They may have used a computer 10 years ago for their job, but they've never seen a tablet and don't understand how it works. So none of this stuff is irrelevant. And so we try to dispel, any of that stigma of like, oh, you don't know what you're doing kind of a thing, and eliminate as much of the fear as possible, so that it's a comfortable space to talk about this in.
And Matt, I think that's a great point that ties back to your learnings about the Tribal Digital Village, about, on one hand, there's the infrastructure side and the service side that is really easy for folks to understand, but on the digital inclusion and the broadband adoption work, like overcoming those individual barriers. And so as we go through the digital equity planning process, how can we continue to identify the existing resources, like through the PUC and some of their grant programs, or the NTIA and NDIA, and as Gladys had mentioned, leverage other partners in this space, either consortia or local groups to bulk up digital navigation, programs to support our tribal nation partners, to overcome some of those individual barriers.
I'm really looking forward to the outcomes of the Digital Inclusion Alliance, a National Digital Inclusion Alliance conference that's coming up. Abby and Davida will have to report back for us. They're over double expected attendance, and I think everybody's very eager to step into this space, and there's going to be a lot of solutions brought to the table. So I'm very interested to see what the evolution of those solutions are now that everybody's gone through the same pandemic and are focusing very hard on this inclusion piece and equity piece. So looking forward to those results.
Thank you. I think we are as well, and hopefully they'll be available to join us in sharing these next time too. Ken, I think I saw your hand up earlier.
Yeah, thank you. Just really appreciating the conversation today. I know I'm learning a lot, and CPUC staff is tuned in as well. So just a couple of announcements. One general, CPUC is continuing to build out its staff and a real focus on sort of the casework aspect of helping to stitch projects together with funding opportunities, and continue to do the engagement in sort of tribe by tribe one-on-one engagement. That's really important to the success, the models, Matt, that you mentioned. A couple of event opportunities I wanted to mention. On February 28th, it's coming up around the corner. We have an in-person tribal consultation that CPUC is hosting. Commissioner Houck will be leading that government to government meeting. It's open to all California tribes. It's an in-person event only. And it will in some ways focus on some of the initiatives and regional challenges specific to the North Coast area. It's going to be hosted at Blue Lake Rancheria. And that again is on February 28th from 3 to 5 p.m. And I can also provide an announcement for that as a link here after I tell you about these events. Again, we encourage a lot of folks, if you can make it to that, the more that we can continue to engage one-on-one, the more we learn will help shape programs. And then the following day on March 1st, it's a Wednesday, again at the same location at Blue Lake Rancheria, we're going to be hosting as part of a SAFE symposium that's being hosted by the tribe, a smoke, air, fire, and energy symposium. There will be a breakout activity that will be a continuation of the consultation from the day before, but it'll be more geared towards a roundtable discussion, again, open to all California tribes. We're going to have Commissioner Houck available again. So it'll be an opportunity for our leadership to hear directly from tribal leadership and their technical staff. And we'll also have subject matter experts like Karen Eckersley and potentially Rob Peterson, also Communications Division Director on hand as well. So it's a good opportunity for us to engage, and we certainly encourage you to participate if you're possibly able to make it. Thanks.
Thank you. And final question for us to think about, if we were to go even broader, and if outside of these two prompts, please share any reflections you may have had about our discussion today, topics we haven't mentioned or specifically ask about, anything digital equity related, our collaboration with tribal communities. Please let us know, and we're here to learn from each other.
Well, I think we need to make sure we capture the chat because there's a lot of that already in the chat, reflecting number 3's question. So let's make sure we capture that for our digestion and absorption later.
I feel like Bob and Andrea are having a conversation in chat, and Andrea lost her voice, but would love to engage in that conversation too. Should I read some of them out loud? Let me see. I think Andrea, right, at the DHCS, Office of Tribal Affairs, we hear quite a bit. The lack of broadband is a significant issue, especially coupled with high vacancy rates for clinicians in rural areas. And then Bob responded to that was that Andrea's comment was spot on. And that it's imperative to establish broadband capacity. Lauren, I feel like I've seen your comment a couple of times as well. Do you mind coming off mute to share your thoughts? If it's possible where you are. Looking for you.
I'm not sure if Lauren's able to come up.
Okay. Did you unmute me?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me now? Hi. I'm Lauren Carter with Community Tech Network. What was your question, Ann?
Oh, my question was more so that you've added a few comments in the chat, and if you don't mind just letting us know verbally what those are, and whether it's relevant to 1, 2, or 3. Feel free to chime
Thank
in.
you. So mostly for 3, but approach is also in going after what is a barrier, because a barrier for a tribal community may also be for a marginalized community as well. They may be immigrants, they may speak various languages. So I also think training digital literacy with in languages that people are most comfortable with and are their first language are vital to this. And the state has done a really great job of helping with that. But digital literacy, you have to teach, whether it's telehealth, whether it's how to use Zoom. Any of those need to be taught with patience and have to be, I think anyone that's training anyone in that space needs to be background checked so that you know that there's safety there, so that there's trust that's developed. So trust is vital. And then also you can have broadband come to your house, but if you can't afford it, and then if you can't see it on a device other than a phone, then it's very difficult to have a complete experience. And then if you don't know how to use the internet at all, so you're lacking in digital literacy, there's a lot of shame that sometimes is involved, but once you can get past that and have them trust you, they're very, very eager to learn and to develop skills. And so, I mean, they can do little things such as learning how to play the guitar, or go to another country through a library, visit. So it just opens up the whole world once they know how to safely navigate it. So, and we're here to be a support to anyone that might have questions for us as well. So it's so exciting to see this. It really is. I'm so impressed that we're finally here.
Thank you for sharing that and being a part of our partnership. Gladys, do you go ahead?
I agree, Anne, and there's a lot of good stuff in the chat as Matt mentioned. I just wanted to make sure that I also along the same lines let folks know that in addition to myself, my colleagues from NTIA are also on this webinar, and not only is California the only state that has 2 federal program officers, we also have 2 tribal federal program officers as resource to you all. And so you see on the participant list, my counterpart is Marina McClatchy as a federal FPO for California, and then our true tribal counterparts and FPOs for the state are Vanessa Cresci and Andrew Orozco. I think Vanessa still is on the call, but I think Andrew had to leave. So I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledge them and that we are all at your disposal. Thank you. And I don't know if they want to say something.
I'm here, Gladys. Thank you. Yeah, Andrew did have to leave, but this is Vanessa, and I've been participating in the call too. Thank you.
All right. If there's no more comment for the session, we will move on to the next part of it. Oh, Bob, go for it.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Am I unmuted?
We can hear you.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to sneak this in. I've been having an email relationship with Matt, Andrew, Scott, Karen, and Ken, who are all on this call. So I wanted to say thank you for agreeing to participate in our tribal leaders consultation in April. I've never had the chance to talk to all of you at once, so I'm going to steal this opportunity. That's all. Thanks.
Not a problem.
Happy to participate.
Not a problem at all. Love it when you go off mic and on camera. We love that. Next slide, please, Fiona. All right, so I'm handing the mic over to Rich Navas, our from Broadband Equity Partnership. I always have to make sure I read that right, to talk us through how to take action and how to move the needle forward, from identifying barriers and to connecting to the solution. What's next?
Thank you,
Rachna.
Anne. Thank you. Next slide. So you heard Scott Adams mention, and you've also heard Matt talk about the state digital equity planning process. And part of this planning process requires a needs assessment so that we can understand what's going on across California and across all tribes. So part of this involves what's called an asset inventory of existing programs and services. We've created a tool called the Digital Equity Ecosystem Mapping Tool to conduct the asset inventory of what's being offered across all the tribes in California and across all municipalities and regions within California. Next slide. The DEAM tool will enable us to gather information about what programs are being offered, where they're being offered, and to whom they're being offered. So it's imperative that we get organizations, coalitions, tribal governments, tribal schools to be able to engage in this tool to tell us what they're doing for the communities that they serve. So we really need your help on this call to be able to push out the DEAM tool to all of your local authorities, the schools that you work with, libraries, any organizations, any tribal governments to engage in this tool to help us understand what's being offered. The incentive of completing this tool, or for completing this tool, is to basically showcase these programs so that they're in the running in the future for possible funding from the capacity grants and competitive grants. So it's imperative for the state to know what you're doing in your communities so that this funding may be available to you in the future. Next slide. So who should participate in completing this tool? If you leverage technology to provide a service or a program, you should be completing this tool. So anytime you help anyone access the internet to do anything, you're engaging in a digital equity service or a program, and we'd love to be able to know about it so that we can actually map it. Next slide. While we're concurrently doing an asset inventory of programs and services across California, we also need to understand what California households are experiencing in terms of their access to the internet, their access to affordable programs, affordable internet services, and access to skills training to be able to use the internet. So we want to understand what are tribal households experiencing. We need to get this information through something called the public survey, the Digital Equity Public Survey. Next slide. So the Digital Equity Public Survey is going to be released in the coming weeks, and we will release it in 12 languages. I heard Lauren Cotter explain how we need to be mindful about working with different communities and some of the barriers that different communities face for languages and understanding what's being asked of them through these tools. And so we're trying to be more comprehensive and inclusive as we prepare these tools in a number of different languages. And we're also including audio files with these tools so that people can actually hear the questions in their own languages being asked with the same intonation that they would use in daily speech. So these are not screen readers for accessibility. These are actually translated questions with the proper intonation for folks to understand, especially in limited English proficiency communities. So we want to assure you that we are trying to be as thoughtful and thorough in this process as we seek to engage the public in understanding what's happening in the household and what people are experiencing in terms of barriers to digital equity. So next slide. So this tool, the public survey tool that we're releasing, is going to be disseminated via an online survey as well as through a phone survey. And we hope to disseminate this in the next 2 weeks to all the 58 counties and we want to oversample for the 8 covered populations that you had mentioned earlier. Next slide. So if we have a bit of time, can we just take a sneak peek at some of these tools to, if you can just hit on new share?
Sure. I'm just having a little Google Chrome playback issue, which just take 30 seconds.
No problem. We'd love to be able to share what we're planning to release. And if you have some input today, we'd love to hear about it. And so Venetia, you were asking about how we are oversampling for covered populations. So while we are doing randomized sampling for the phone survey, we are actually targeting specific samples like veterans. We'll work with the Department of Rehabilitation to cover and sample for people with disabilities. So we are making sure that we're also targeting populations that fall under covered samples. So this is currently the public survey that you're looking at. So if you can just scroll through. So it will ask you some of the questions just to identify what demographics you're in, but these are anonymous, so we don't collect any personally identifiable information. So we want to assure everyone that this is a private survey. We are acknowledging privacy issues, so please don't hesitate to complete this tool and push it out to the constituents that you serve, so that we can understand better what's going on in terms of households. How are tribal residents using access to the internet? If they're using wireless services, in fact, if they're using their mobile phones to access the internet, what are they using it for? We want to get a better understanding of how all California residents, including tribal residents, are leveraging the internet for their daily lives. So if we can actually get to the DEEM tool, so we basically want to understand from the DEEM tool what is going on your end in terms of your ability to provide programs and services to the constituents that you serve. Are you experiencing connectivity issues and barriers to connectivity that prevent you from engaging your respective constituents in some of the services that other groups in urban and suburban sectors can actually leverage? So we're trying to understand this from a very comprehensive approach, from the household to the organizations serving that household. Where are there barriers to digital equity? And you can go back to the PowerPoint. So if you have any questions about this tool, about the information that we're collecting, how to push out this tool to the groups that you serve, the tribes that you work with, please contact us. We're here to help. We're here to help explain the tool in detail. We're here to help answer any questions about what we hope to gain from the data that we collect. And we're also going to post this data in aggregate form once we have everything collected later in the year. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Anne, and we'll be here again for any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Richna. And yes, I'll keep an eye out on the chat too, because sometimes questions for you do come in via the chat. And next slide, Fiona, please. Yes, and what our tribal collaboration outcome area working group will be focusing on in the next few months, including developing strategies that align with our state digital equity plan priorities, conduct the gap analysis, and through the tools that Richna just mentioned, we'll be able to evaluate assets and develop recommendations for CDT within the assigned outcome area working group for inclusions in the SDEP. So next slide, please. And what that looks like in terms of our month-by-month working group is in March. We're hoping to look at how does digital inequity create social, economic, educational, and health disparities for tribal members. So what we did today is more of a kickoff, right? Going broad and bringing key partners in this first meeting, and we're hoping to rely on you to expand our reach, bringing more tribal representatives to the space, as well as going deeper in these topics and questions that we posed earlier. In May, we will be discussing what digital equity programs are currently working well in your community and what's missing. So kind of what we asked in number 2, but more so if you have impact reports, programs that's making progress that you're very excited to share with us, we would love to hear it from you, even if they're ongoing, right? It does not have to be in the finish and final phase for it to be successful. We're all trying different strategies here. And then in June, using the public survey and DEEM data to shape STEP priorities, we hope to be able to report to you what our surveys find by then, and we're hoping to see and identify how we can incorporate into STEP, and hopefully you can lend us your voice and expertise and let us know how to prioritize what we found from data to narratives to recommendations. Next slide, please. Okay, and then this one is our high-level timeline of what our plan looked like, and we talked through a lot of our different planning components, but want to bring your attention to July and August. Where we really want to be is by July, be able to draft these plans with the recommendations that you all bring forward. And then once we have that draft, use August as the month to engage and bring, collect public comment. And so entire month to make sure that those who are involved and impacted by STEP have a chance to have their say. And then really using the last 3 months from September through November to refine the plan, right? To make sure that what we're submitting is inclusive and equitable and representative of what we're putting forward. And hopefully mid to late November, that's when we'll submit. And that's our entire planning process. Happy to go deeper into any of this if you all want to, but want to make sure we have time for questions as well. Last slide, please. And this is our contacts. The general one is digitalequity@state.ca.gov. Tish will put all other relevance links in the chat where you can find past events, upcoming events, what is DE process about if you would like to a written version of that, and our contacts on the screen. But with that, thank you so much for joining us. We'll stick around for any questions, or if you have any last minute comments, please feel free to go off mute and we'll chat. Thank you for your time.
And I just wanted to ask, are we going to get the information so we can send out the DEEM surveys to our communities?
Absolutely. You're going to get a link. You're going to get an accompaniment that explains the DEEM tool. We will make sure you have everything that you need to promote this. And just, again, if you need anything more than that, if you feel that what we've given is insufficient and you want more, please reach out. I will do whatever it takes to get people to complete this.
And when we're at an ACP event, is that a good time to ask questions?
That's a perfect time to ask questions. I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you. That's actually a good strategy. That's a good place to ask some of these questions. And, I know that in working with other tribes in other states, that it's helpful to have a paper copy ready to be able to help some elders fill out some of these tools. So if that works, please let's connect offline and let's find you ways to get all the help you need to leverage that, especially when you're going for an ACP event.
Thank you. I also wanted to mention one other barrier that we have found. Sometimes people don't want to give information because they're afraid the government can track them. And so, it's really working with a trusted partner that helps us overcome some of those barriers so that it's not just us trying to to do something, it's with the partner that they have a comfort level with as well. So, and it's getting that partner to trust you. So there's a lot of trust that goes into these relationships, and really being able to get people online and build them up so that they have more opportunities in their life and change their lives. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Thank you so much for that. Couldn't agree more. And we need trusted messengers and trusted partners to help us in this process. We can't get those tools completed when there is current mistrust, and we need to rely on you and others to help us in engaging tribes and Californians in general to come to the table to make their voices heard. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, everyone. It was really wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you to all of our speakers and our ASL interpreters as well for helping us throughout the session.
Thanks, Anne.